Voltron franchises, say like a Star Wars, right? There's so many shows and movies. How do you balance giving people enough, but also not overdoing it?
Well, I tell you what, if we have that problem, that'll be a good problem to have.
Fair enough,
and I hope we have that problem where we have to say, we have to pull back because there's too much Voltron content out there.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Swagglecast, the video podcast series where I get to have elevated conversations with influential people in the comic book hobby. My guests today are Bob KOPLAR, president of World Event Productions that famously created Voltron, and esteemed graffiti pop artist David Ruggieri, who is currently collaborating with Bob on an incredible Voltron art project. I thought that this was a really great conversation, one that you guys would be very interested in. I talked to Bob about what it is like to actually manage an IP the size of Voltron, talking about the franchiseification of all the properties that we grew up on in the 80s, how he feels about licensing should fans have some ownership over the IPs that they very much love. It was also very interesting talking to Bob about his experience with the comic book side of things, and I think you guys will be interested to hear what he had to say about Voltron for the future. If you ever wonder what it takes to manage an IP, are a fan of Voltron, or have been stacking those Voltron 1s from 1984, this is definitely a conversation that you're going to want to hear. Thank you all so much for watching. Of course, if you guys could like, comment, or subscribe, I would appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed these long-form conversations, and with that, I give you Bob KOPLAR and David Ruggieri. All right, well, I'm here with Bob KOPLAR and David Ruggieri. Bob, David, thank you so much for hopping on the channel today.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, before we did our little convo, I'm sure I'm going to give you guys both kind of a little introduction and talk about, why we're here having this conversation today. But if you could, maybe for people who aren't as familiar, maybe I'll start with you, Bob. Could you just give a little bit of a background of who you are, your relation to the Voltron franchise, and how you came to be here on this podcast with me talking about Voltron right now?
Yeah, you want the whole life story or just the Cliff Notes version?
Just give us the good stuff. Give it the good stuff.
No, nepotism. That's what got me here. WEP, it's a family business. My father founded it. He brought Voltron over to the United States from Japan back in 1984, and just kind of didn't know what he didn't know, and it was just a company full of young whippersnappers who wanted to do something cool and fun, and they found this show and kind of caught lightning in a bottle. So me personally, my career, I'm actually an attorney by trade, and I worked at a law firm for several years in New York, and I actually came back to join the family business. And my first project here was Voltron Force in 2011. That was kind of the first, I guess, reboot, so to speak, of the franchise since we did, or they did. I wasn't with the company for Voltron, the Third Dimension, but then it was about 10 years later we came out with Voltron Force, which was my project, and then I've been sort of managing the franchise since then for the business here.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Voltron has it's like this organic history as it connects to sort of this pop culture thing, where it's like, I think if I'm not mistaken, like your father found it at kind of a Comic-Con or a sci-fi con or something like that, and just went up to one of the booths and the tables of the company that had been making it.
Yeah,
and
it was actually a programming convention for TV stations. So it was an international convention where producers from all over the world would bring their shows and sell them to broadcasters and networks around the world. And my father at the time was in the TV business. So he had an independent television station here in St. Louis, where I currently live, called KPLR TV, and was looking for a kids show. And so what does he do? He goes to the international market to find a show that he can dub into English, because at the time the networks, your Fox, ABC, CBS, and NBC were starting to gobble up all the kids programming. So for independent channels like KPLR, it became harder and harder to find good programming. So he decided to make his own using a product from the international market. And at the time, bringing anime from Japan into the United States was pretty novel. There really wasn't any anime, certainly not on broadcast television.
Right. And so relating it back here to David, also another kind of a St. Louis person, we're kind of the home of Voltron in a way. David, you yourself are an artist who is now sort of working on this Voltron collaboration. But I have to imagine that you would have been somewhat influenced back in 1984 when that show first came out, right?
Yeah, and I think Bob he's really humble about what his dad did. KPLR Channel 11 was really a big deal in St. Louis. I mean, it had some of the most popular programmings around, and it was a staple for the Saturday morning cartoons. So, I'm very, very old, and back in the day where you couldn't just watch everything on demand, and Voltron was one of the ones. It was new, and it was exciting, and it was different than the things that were on, which was really kind of really a lot of foreshadowing or foresight in them to bring that over, and it just had such a good message, right? I didn't understand it, when I was a kid, but everything that it has with teamwork and all of that kind of stuff, and it was just fun. I mean, it was a space, and it had robots and lions, and I mean, how could you not love it? But KPLR, they had, you guys had wrestling at the Chase, right? With the wrestling, and it was, I still remember, still remember watching that with my grandpa. We would, gather around the TV, and the wrestling at the Chase would come on, and we all had to be quiet. And we were watching the Von Erichs and all of these guys that really set the tone for this big, these huge industries of, again, the network, the cartoons, and the
That's awesome. Yeah. It's awesome you brought up wrestling at the Chase. That's that was an institution in St. Louis, and that predates. Everybody knows wrestling as like WWE and Vince McMahon's operation there, but it used to be kind of a regional thing, and this was back in the 60s and 70s, and so this was kind of the precursor to WWE, and the St. Louis version of that was called Wrestling at the Chase, and that was kind of one of the mainstays of KPLR TV, and it was wrestling done in a fancy ballroom. So if you could imagine that the Chase Park Plaza Hotel, that famous hotel here in St. Louis, had this elegant ballroom, and they had these giant wrestlers come in and beat the shit out of each other inside of this nice ballroom with people eating steak dinners and stuff. And but they had like Andre the Giant wrestled there, and Ric Flair, I think, got his started wrestling in the Chase. So there were some real legends that wrestled there.
Yeah, I have this early memory, and I had to be 7, 8, 9 years old, and my dad took us to Wrestling at the Chase, and they had a Missouri title. Now they have the championship belt and things like that, but because it was regional, they had the Missouri wrestling title, and I believe it was Dick the Bruiser, and Dick the Bruiser, he lost that match, and I will never forget, the woman in front of us was in tears, sobbing uncontrollably, and had to be helped out of the arena because that transpired. And I think that was the first big sporting event I can remember attending. But you're right. It was like going to a hotel, right? I mean, the valet would park your car, you'd walk through this nice place, and then there's a wrestling ring.
Yeah. It's really interesting, actually, as you guys organically brought up wrestling and stuff, but I know a lot of the people who watch my channel and are interested in these properties like Voltron and stuff, like there's so much of a connection between WWE and wrestling and the fondness and the nostalgia of that. And a lot of these properties that came out, like a Voltron, or I associate Voltron to the Transformers and the G.I. Joes and all those great, 80s cartoons and stuff. And there's definitely I think it's all sort of the heroes sort of journey and stuff like that everyone is attracted to, and those similar beats within wrestling, the superhero figure within wrestling, and as it relates to even a character like Voltron. So
exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover for that. Yeah. But
no, it's sure the world of wrestling definitely, I think, fits more under the entertainment tent than the sports tent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we didn't know that at the time, right? At the time, we did not.
It's rigged.
It's real.
Don't tell anybody. That's just between us, okay?
Okay,
don't
that's good.
Yeah,
Well, your secret's safe with me, but it's you know, and I think going to your point, Mickey, is that the nostalgia with this, right? And I was just at a comic book convention, and it was actually Como. We'll just give him a shameless plug here, but you know, Como comic book convention, and I picked up Voltron #1, and you know, I saw that there, and it just you know, these things that are associated with good memories, and I was lucky enough to have, you know, very good you know, happy upbringing, and these kinds of things are just important, right? You know, when the world is seemingly out of control, you can kind of tie it back to something that's enjoyable and you know, a simpler time kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, Bob, speaking of that Voltron #1, I think that was a company called Modern Publishing. I don't even know if Bob, you're even familiar with that particular comic book, but talk to me a little bit about running Voltron as like an IP and a franchise, and maybe even associated with comic books. I know that recently you guys, maybe the last run was with Dynamite Entertainment, that you guys had some comic books and
So
stuff.
Dynamite did. I pulled a couple of these from my shelf here. They did a series called Year One, and another series back circa 20. Let's see if I have a date in here. This was around 10 years ago, I believe this came out, but the most recent one was the one from Lion Forge, based on Voltron Legendary Defender. And this series is outstanding. I mean, in my opinion, they've all been outstanding, but this one, what we had, the luxury we had with this one is we actually had continuity between the series and the comic book. So fans of the, you know, a lot of times with these things, you have a show that's well thought out. You have the canon and the storylines, and the unique character nuances, and then you go and license a comic book, and you go hire some writer to go do it. And you know, some do better jobs than others about maintaining the continuity. Well, we actually had the writers from the show, Tim Hedrick, Mitch Iverson, do the storylines for this, so it fits totally seamlessly with the storylines of the show. So that was kind of a nice luxury to have with this series. And Digital Art Chefs did an amazing job with the artwork. It's all really cool. So yeah, we've had some really good comic books over the years. And what was the question? Am I answering your question?
Well, so how do you oversee sort of that kind of continuity, as you put it? Like, right, you have a comic book there that was connected to the show. Yeah. I certainly hope you're going to have more comic books in the future, but when you eventually get to that point and you do it, because it's what I think is interesting about the Voltron franchise is you are like like you said, you started with your dad. It's sort of a family business. It's not like a Disney, who you go into this,
right,
operation where it's like, okay, here's these long history and total world Bible of like, this is what you have to follow. And it's all this continuous thing. Like, how do you keep the world still connected, but have all these different creatives sort of handling it?
Yeah, it's been, I mean, that's the biggest challenge, right? Is to maintain that continuity for the franchise, to maintain what makes the franchise great through the various iterations of it, because you have to evolve the franchise at the same time as you want to make. You can't keep everything the same, because that just gets boring. I mean, people want to see these characters evolve, and they want to see Voltron evolve into modern day. So, times have changed, sensibilities have changed, the show needs to change with it. So what we've tried to do throughout the years is to grow the IP, the show, along with modern sensibilities, while at the same time maintaining that DNA of what makes Voltron special. And it's not easy to identify exactly what that is. Sometimes it's a matter of, I don't know what it is, but I know when I see it. I don't. So if you sit down and you write down, a lot of the times what we try to do is we put our sacred cows, like this is what makes Voltron. And if you don't have this, it's not Voltron. And one of the easy ones is, of course, it's 5 robot lions, and the colors have to be, red, green, blue, yellow, and black. And they come together and form a big robot, and the robot has a blazing sword. I mean, those elements have to be there. Now, what else has to be there? Do they have to be the same pilots every time? Maybe not. Like, can we evolve those characters? It certainly opens the door to more interesting storytelling when we can weave in more, newer characters who have different perspectives. Because I think what people loved about Voltron originally was you had different people putting aside their differences and coming together as one. And the lions coming together to form the robot is this ultimate physical manifestation of teamwork, of people working together. The show drove that home almost better than any other show I know. So to this day, you have Voltron as sort of a slang term for great things coming together as one. But when you look back, it's like, yeah, well, that's certainly the case. That's awesome. But it was 5 white guys, right? And when Allura came in, there was a princess, there was a pink, a princess wearing pink, and but the rest it was relatively homogenous. So how can we push that further? What does it mean to have people from different backgrounds and different perspectives come together? So how can we weave in other ethnicities, other backgrounds, and really drive home that message of people coming together and the importance of having different perspectives and different backgrounds, and how that strengthens us, how that can really make us truly stronger. Just having those differences. So
yeah,
that's part of the franchise we want to always make sure we're hitting on.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, definitely, I think the interpersonal conflicts that come with all the team members, but having to set aside their differences to take on, the literal greater evil that is like, the monster and stuff. And I think that is sort of that special sauce of Voltron. Yeah. David, you guys are now working on sort of an art project yourself with doing kind of these Voltron figures and stuff. And like Bob said, like, obviously it's very, very easy to kind of say, all right, well, we need the blue one, we need the black one, we need the yellow one. We know there's a certain aesthetics that you have to hit, but what is it? Talk a little bit about your project and what you guys have been doing, and then talk a little bit about like trying to figure out like what the essence is of Voltron, and like that even just everything you do with like balancing like what you think sort of a pop culture collector is looking for when you deal with your art pieces and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of my work is based on nostalgia and that kind of thing. So I use a lot of imagery from the past and pop culture stuff. And what we're working on now is I'm taking my graffiti pop art style and applying it to these established characters of the 5 lions, and then coming together with Voltron. So with the urban art movement has really, really just grown and evolved. And, when I was first in art school, way back when, graffiti was just starting to come to be known and really seen over. The internet was just starting. All these things were just coming together. So people were seeing these different styles of this artwork and this graffiti on buildings, California, you got the West Coast, the East Coast style, and all this kind of thing. And since then, since the late 80s and 90s, it has now really started to move into galleries and collectors, and some graffiti artists are the most popular and successful artists that are out there. So I'm my idea was to take that style that I have and to represent these characters and kind of give it this this new feel for it. And again, it's a lot of color, a lot of graffiti background and things like that. And so I was lucky enough to team up with Bob and his team, and Tiffany have all been all been great to work with. And so we have these 5 limited edition prints that are coming out, and then there'll be an additional one. That will be available to select consumers. So, but it's been great. It's been great so far, and just being able to be involved in a small way in this franchise has been really exciting for me.
Yeah, you mentioned the nostalgia part of it, and I think that is absolutely a huge thing. When we talk about comic books, you see people collecting all this stuff. Nostalgia plays a big role of it. Where I'm going with this, and I'm curious to hear Bob you talk about this, is we're in an interesting place, right? Where it's like there's a lot of franchisification, a lot of IPs, right? That are really important to people, and a lot of people of our ilk and age grew up with things like Voltron or say Transformers or even WWE wrestling, and there is a lot of this nostalgia. But you obviously have to think about, okay, if this is an IP that we want to have last for generations, you always have to create, okay, the next generation needs to be introduced to Voltron in some kind of way so that they can have nostalgia, one day and buy the art piece 30 years from now, that means something to them. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is that something that you guys discuss when you shepherd IPs, talking about, okay, it'd be nice to have the live action movie so Mickey and David could go crazy in the movie theater, but then also maybe the 6-year-old kid needs his early morning cartoon as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you approach and manage an IP in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into that, I just wanted to say that how excited we are to be working with David. I hadn't touched on that yet, but it's interesting. Tiffany actually brought to my attention this really cool sort of street art version of the Voltron lions and said, "Hey, this is a really cool product. I want to feature it in our Voltron store." And I said, "Heck yeah, we need to get our hands on these." And I asked about the artist, and she said, "Well, he's right here in St. Louis," which for me is it's so rare to be able to work with somebody from our hometown.
Yeah,
They're always
it's
in LA or New York or something. So working with David right here in St. Louis was a real kind of a treat. He came to our office and we kind of geeked out over some fanboy stuff. So it was a lot of fun. Anyway, you asked a great question about the franchise and getting several generations interested in the franchise, because if you don't, it dies. It does. I mean, it always will have that retro appeal of for people of a certain age. Who kind of grew up watching, the 80s show that, guys like me and you were, we're in 30s and 40s but getting older every year. So, if a franchise doesn't succeed in attracting a younger generation and getting them interested in it, it's just eventually going to peter out. So, you're right. We have to get the kids interested. We have to get different ages and different walks of life interested in the show, in creating that big tent. So part of what we did is with Legendary Defender, we hit an audience that we were somewhat unexpected. So we knew, what was great about that show is we worked with true fans of the original show. So it stayed true, I think, to what made the original Voltron great. It went back to sort of the anime style. It wasn't technically anime, but it was done in a very anime-like style. So I think fans of the original show really did enjoy watching that on Netflix. Now, we expected to get kids as well. And we did succeed to some extent in getting kids. And when I say kids, people under the age of, 11. But surprisingly to us, the core fan group that Legendary Defender attracted was more teenagers, young 20s. So it was so sophisticated in its storytelling that it really resonated with a little bit older of an audience, which was really cool to see. And it was also we thought this was more of a boys or a male oriented show, or but a show like Voltron used to be referred to as a boys action franchise. Well, Legendary Defender was 50-50, if not slightly female skewing with its audience. We don't know this for sure. It's sort of third-party research because Netflix doesn't share its data. But there's some evidence that points to the show being possibly even more popular with females than males, which I thought was really cool. So it's for people of all sexes, people of all ages, and with right now we're working on a feature film. So what I'm really excited about is a project that we've been trying to get off the ground since really the early 2000s. We've been at this for a long time. What's been important though is that we get the script right, that we get the story right on the page, and that we find that filmmaker who has a vision for what Voltron can be. And I think we have found that person. We're working with a director named Rawson Marshall Thurber, who has directed some of the biggest movies ever on Netflix. He's worked with massive stars like The Rock and Gal Gadot, and he's hilariously funny, and he knows action, and most of all, he's a Voltron fanboy. I mean, he loves the property and just has a vision for where he wants to take it, which I think is truly exciting. And we have a great partner in Amazon Studios who is helping us shepherd the development, and they are behind the project 100%. So super excited for where that's going to go, and can't wait to share more of that when it's ready. So feature film, that's going to be to me, I think, the big item and it's going to be you asked about how do we get a younger audience, how do we grow the Voltron tent. Well, the film, the vision behind it is really it's to be for all ages. So Voltron it's anime in origin, so there's a couple of ways you could go with it. You could lean into sort of the anime component, which can be dark. Certain aspects of it can skew older. Well, we're gonna lean more into sort of the heart of Voltron and what it means, and make it a movie that you could bring your kids to, that parents and kids alike can enjoy. And to me, that's like the most exciting thing ever. Is we call that co-viewing, that you can kind of relive your childhood and introduce it to your child at the same time. So that's kind of the holy grail, I think.
Right. I'm curious if you have thoughts on the franchiseification of a lot of other properties. I mean, we don't have to go into it, but there's a lot of talk, and not that Voltron is this, because I'm super hyped for the long-awaited live-action movie that we've all been waiting our entire lives for. But say there's like on the other side of this coin, there's like the oversaturation element to it, right? Where it's like a lot of franchises, say like a Star Wars, right? There's so many shows and movies and things like that. Do you guys ever talk about that as your brand? Like, how do you balance keeping a brand out there, keeping it alive, giving people enough to feel satiated, but also not overdoing it and not oversaturating it? I mean, there's like this balance, right? I mean, is that something you guys ever have to sort of discuss or talk about?
I tell you what, that'll be if we have that problem, that'll be a good problem to have.
Fair enough,
and I hope we have that problem where we have to say, we have to pull back because there's too much Voltron content out there. No, look, I get it. Like sometimes Hollywood is, it's really dependent on franchises now. Nobody wants to take a risk, and having that franchise sort of mitigates that risk because you have that brand equity and people kind of know what it is, and it reduces that upfront marketing investment that you have to make in order to attract people to the studios. And I think that's why franchises right now are so popular and so successful. And that's why, you see comic book movies doing so well, sequel after sequel. And I know people kind of get jaded about, it's another sequel. Well, look, like, with Voltron, we haven't had one film. So I'm hoping we have a film and a sequel and maybe 2 sequels. But the fact is, everybody is in today's day and age. Media is so fragmented that to really be overexposed is an incredibly hard thing to do, right? Like back when we were growing up, you turned on your TV and you could watch either whatever cartoon was on the independent station or maybe on the NBC station. Usually there was only one station showing a cartoon. So literally, 30 million kids across the United States are watching the exact same show. That's where you can have overexposure. Right now, their kids are watching shows on Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, YouTube, for God's sake, YouTube. I mean, we're now competing with every creator out there. I mean, we're like everybody with a video camera now has the ability to create their own show, and kids are watching that. I know my daughter watches people play with toys, and she just loves it. And she can't get enough of it. I'm like, honey, watch a cartoon for God's sake. But no, she'd rather watch a kid play with like a Barbie doll. So anyway, the content that's out there is limitless. So being overexposed is not my primary fear right now. I would just like to introduce a whole generation to Voltron. That's what I would love to do first, and then it's like the conversation of when does it make sense to have a sequel? When does it make sense to evolve, to do something different? I mean, you see, there's other franchises that I look at just in awe of what they're doing. Spider-Man being one. I mean, people, they didn't used to think that you could do a live action movie and then it's sort of in the same time frame come out with an animated movie with completely different narrative. I mean, think about that. Like, we were just talking about the importance of having continuity of narrative, and you can't have different, different storylines going in different directions. Well, think about the Spider-Verse and what they've done with that. I mean, it's exceptional. But somehow it still maintains the core of what Spider-Man is. So there are some amazing things you can do while staying true to who you are, and it's kind of exciting to think of the number of different directions that a franchise like Voltron can go, especially with the ensemble that Voltron is, and the whole universe that it draws from, because it is a rich universe of planets and characters and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, yeah, it would be a nice problem to have, and I think it's fair to say. I mean, I'm a Voltron fan, so I think it's fair to say that I think Voltron, of the franchises that, to me, I think of that are big franchises that came out of the '80s, has been one of the ones that I think is fairly underused. I think I'm ready for being oversaturated with Voltron. I mean, if you hit me with that 1980s theme in anything, I'm ready. Like, you can take my money.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my fault. Like, I want to get it out there some more. I don't want to be known as like the most underexploited franchise from the '80s.
Yeah, no, not in a bad way. I just think I actually think it's a very good thing. And I think what you saw, say, with like the success of like the Barbie film, is it's like, here you have an IP that people were kind of excited really to see because it was so new for them, or they hadn't seen it. And it's not that Barbie hasn't lived in the consciousness of culture. It just was like, finally, here is a movie that people were ready to consume. So I think it's,
talk about hitting all of the right notes. What Mattel did with that franchise is,
right.
I mean, love it or hate it. The making of the film, the marketing of the film, the storytelling, it was brilliant because it was authentic. And Mattel allowed Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie to criticize Barbie at the same time that they were celebrating Barbie. And that's why I think audiences went along with it. And they it was humorous, and it was just super entertaining. And And so, and I think that's what's like the key for, I think, any successful franchise is that you stay authentic to what the franchise is, and so that's something we certainly plan to do with Voltron, and we'll try to do with every project we take on.
Right. And I think just starting with a solid base, right? I mean, you're starting with a product that was already really good, and you're not trying to crowbar something into, this public sphere that never really worked in the first place. It did work, and it worked on a lot of levels. And I think that brings a lot of value, and, to hit different target markets, right? And for everyone to get value out of it. It's like the Barbie franchise. I mean, there's 60-year-old people in there that enjoyed it as much as 10-year-olds, and but they took away different things from it. But it was they were all good, and it started a conversation, and it got people interested in seeing different types of movies and different things, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I'm curious, David, how you feel about this, because obviously with your art, I feel like you always have to have sort of a finger on the pulse of like whatever your next pieces are going to be, right? Where it's like, okay, well, what is the thirst right now for if you did a Barbie piece, or what is the thirst if you did like, a Voltron thing, or some franchise? Should you do another Star Wars thing? Is there still a fervor for that? Like, what's been your sense? I'm curious from like your artist side, or like feeling the energy out there, like what people are looking for from that pop cultural sense. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, from my perspective, I've been lucky enough to where when I first started, to this journey of seeing how far I could go as an artist, and I want to get into galleries and that kind of thing, and before I got to there, I really sat down and I started thinking, what do people want? What would someone want to buy? And I started producing some pieces, and they just didn't have like the heart and the soul, as I call it, in the piece. So then I shifted, and I said, what do I want on my wall? And so I started making pieces like that, and I've been very lucky that the ones that I have really resonated with people. Now I do have some, that just have kind of missed the mark. And like when I do shows, when I do art fairs, or when I'm in galleries, I'm very cognizant of seeing how people react. And I have a little notebook, and I mark down comments and things, and where people don't know I'm listening type thing, and I kind of see what the responses are, and so I kind of get a feel for that. And like with the Voltron piece has been on my radar for a while, and because that's just something that I would want to hang up, and
right.
And then so with and I'm a very big original artwork person. I think that that everyone should have original artwork in their house, or limited edition prints, and because I don't want somebody to spend money. I mean, it's hard to hold on to money, and I really have a lot of it's really humbling that people will spend money for my work, but I want them to have something that's original, and it has some scarcity to it, because it makes it a little more special, and that with this Voltron piece, it just so happened I'm in St. Louis, and I knew someone that knew someone, and that's how the introductions were made, and it really worked out. And I mean, like Bob said, it's great to work with people that are in the city, and I mean, I love St. Louis. St. Louis is a great place. It has its faults like everywhere else, but it's a good place. And we have with Voltron being here, it really just makes it that much more fun to do that. To actually go down to the office, it was really great. I mean, they got a giant Voltron statue. It's really cool place.
Yeah. Bob, did it surprise you how much like the Voltron has sort of permeated in like the culture and stuff like that? I mean, even beyond David's work, I see people with like Voltron colored backpacks and stuff, like whether they're actually official merch or not, but like, or people do their own sort of artwork and stuff. I mean, it really is like a brand that, has, I don't know. It's like something that people love to wear on their sleeve. Like, what's your thought on that?
It's the coolest part of this job and being associated with this franchise is seeing fan art and the way fans come up with their own interpretations. We actually put a book together a few years ago with Jeremy Corey, who used to be our creative director. Edited together this amazing book, and we published it it was just nothing but fan art, and it was some of the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen, and just celebrating Voltron, but different kind of styles. And that's just like amazing. And I think IP owners are now more and more willing to embrace their IP being shown through the lens of other people, of creators, of letting fans take ownership. I mean, you're seeing Minions is doing this to a huge degree of just like allowing people to celebrate the franchise and make cool stuff and do stuff like what David is doing. You see actually right over my left shoulder. Everything's reversed, so I can't. That's actually a fan art picture right there that sits right on my desk here. I've actually, if I could give you a 360, our whole office is covered in fan art because it's just so cool, and I love seeing these colorful and just innovative visions for what Voltron and what it could be. And so seeing people, I've seen a lot of Voltron tattoos. I don't have one personally, but seeing like a giant yellow lion tattooed on somebody's leg, that's a sight to behold. It's fun. It's fun as heck seeing all these interpretations of the franchise, and we love it and want to celebrate it more. We feature it on social media a lot, and want to do it in every way possible because that's really special.
And I can say that not every IP holder holds that philosophy, because I know a friend of mine, he's an artist in New York, and he's very successful. His pieces are in the $50,000 to $100,000 per painting range, and he has received cease and desist orders from some large companies because he has used some of their IP in his paintings. And with the recent Andy Warhol Prince lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court over ownership of an image, and that was one of Andy Warhol's famous prints of Prince that was taken from a photograph, and the photographer's estate had sued Andy Warhol over the ownership rights of that, and the Supreme Court had ruled on that in favor of the photographer. And there's a lot of concerns in the art world. That case, I'm not doing it justice. Obviously, Bob, as a lawyer, you could probably speak to it more. But there's a lot of concerns over how that's going to be misinterpreted and applied incorrectly to other cases as they're going forward. So we have a situation now to where IP is and what is fair use and what is in the public domain and what work is a derivative of something else. And I know other artists that use I use a lot of imagery in my work, and I know artists that do it well, and overwhelmingly most of the organizations are very happy about that, right? I mean, they're using images and they're getting people to see their product again, refresh memories and things like that. But there are some companies out there that are still very much against that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if either of you guys heard about sort of what happened to Wizards of the Coast with their Dungeons and Dragons property. They similarly, they had they've always sort of had this kind of I'll probably lose some street cred because I can't know the exact term, but they had this like a handshake sort of deal with their community, right? Where it was like, hey, everyone can kind of
do open source, right?
Yeah, sort of an open source. You can do your own D&D stuff. You can do artwork, sometimes you can kind of monetize in some sort of way as long as it doesn't quite interfere. And then they kind of rolled out hey, we're going to take that all back. And of course, anytime you take something away from people, like everyone's going to be upset about it. So back to what you were saying, Bob, I mean, I feel like it is really special when you want to give people some feeling of ownership over an IP so that they can enjoy it. And people like David can celebrate and make their own kind of unique art piece. And I, in my adult age, can have a piece of his artwork on my wall that scratches my nostalgia itch, but still cool enough for my age range, but then you don't want people, you don't want to come in and just say like, hey, you can't paint that, so it's this balance, right? That you,
I certainly understand the need to protect IP to maintain its continuity and its image in the public. So in order to own IP, like you have to enforce your IP to some extent, but there's a concept of proportionality and understanding what the intent was behind the use. There's a difference between somebody making their own Voltron toy and selling 100,000 units of it, and somebody making a beautiful painting that incorporates, Voltron imagery. Like there's proportionality here. I think I heard some crazy story that Disney, like at one time, like sued a boy wanted like to put Spider-Man on his, a young child who died wanted to put Spider-Man on his tombstone, and like Disney like sued to stop.
Oh my God.
I swear to God, I don't know the details behind this, but like there are some outrageous cases of just overzealous IP enforcement that we try to stay away from being that way. Well, so
I think companies lose sight of like the spirit of their product and images and things like that. And I had done a McDonald's fries painting, and a franchisee had bought it, and he owned like 35 franchises, and his friend was with him, and he's like, "Oh, you got to give it to them for free, or we'll have you sued for trademark infringement." And I'm like, please sue me. That would be the best advertising. I would be able to pay for that, right? I mean, if McDonald's comes after me, you have it. But I'm not dipping into their revenue stream. But I mean, obviously he was just kidding. But yeah, if there are companies that have just taken it too far, and it loses the whole thing about the spirit of Spider-Man and what they're trying to say, right? To do that,
right?
And,
do you think maybe Bob, you can have a little bit more of that mindset, because it's almost over the Voltron sort of history, and I don't know the exact details, but you've had different sort of licensing partners and things like that. Different toy brands have done stuff, different comic companies have done stuff, and this is different than, say, Disney owning Star Wars and saying, okay, we have everything sort of like, or it's all under the the Disney umbrella. Can you talk a little bit about just the difference there?
Well, I mean, you brought up the licensees, and that gets to the heart of the matter of why companies can be overzealous in policing their IP. Because the fact is, we do have licensees, and they do, they want to commercialize Voltron in a legal manner. So they'll approach us, and they'll take a license, and the way it works is they pay a royalty to the IP owner, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship because in theory the IP generates sales of the product, so a piece of those sales go back to the IP owner in theory to compensate the IP owner for the value that the IP brought to that product. Now, if licensees are doing this legitimately, and you're not policing other people who are making stuff and selling it without a proper license, it's not fair to those licensees, and they wouldn't have any incentive to do business with you, and you lose control over your franchise, over your product. So to some level, you have to police that, and but like I said, you have to be reasonable about it, and you have to be proportional about it. And so it's a little bit of a balance, but it's always important to do. So you got to protect your licensees.
Right. Is there desire to like have it all versus be a licensor, where it's like, some companies, you start world events films, and then you start world events toys, and you start world events video games, and it just becomes like a Disney, where it's like you do everything under your control. Is it how do you decide to do that as far as a model? I mean, obviously that's a whole other thing, right? I mean, that's massive expansion as a business.
Do you like go vertically expand and you start making toys? And I mean, it turns out making shows is really hard. Making toys is really hard. Making, like you look at even Disney doesn't make their own toys. They know what they do well. They make entertainment well. They're great storytellers. So I think it's rare to find companies that do everything well. I think what's more common is that you're finding a lot of toy makers go into the entertainment space, and on a lot of, for a lot of reasons, it's smart because they realize to be able to tell a story behind the toy adds that much more value to the toy. It creates an emotional connection between kids and the product they're selling. I mean, Hasbro's been doing this for a long time. The first Transformers film is kind of what put Voltron on the map to become a feature film, and then and Mattel, obviously we talked about the Barbie movie. Mattel is following suit, and they're having a lot of success with Mattel Studios. But to go the other direction and to become a toy seller, I mean, making and selling toys is an entirely different business that I know very little about. So just I mean, we're a small company, so just trying to run world events here is challenge enough. But it's interesting you say that, though, because I'm just learning about Marvel and how they got started. Marvel started as a toy company. Like Ike Perlmutter bought this struggling toy company out of bankruptcy, and basically decided to get in the movie business so we could sell toys, which was kind of backward. And then lo and behold, found out the entertainment was actually more profitable than the selling of the toys. But yeah, I mean, each of those sort of levels, I think people kind of underappreciate the risk and the return of each level of that value chain, and the challenge of every one of those businesses, and the complexity that multiplies exponentially the more kind of areas you get into along the value chain.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
I'm sorry, Akisa.
No, go ahead.
I think as we get older, Bob, I don't think they're toys; they're figures, right?
Yeah. They're collectibles.
Collectibles.
They're statues here.
Yeah, right. And I mean that's really moving into the art market as well. I mean, some artist, Cause is a graffiti artist, and I mean he sells his work for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he has a line of collectibles of the nylon figures, and they have open editions, and they have some limited edition runs, and I mean these get up into the thousands of dollars, and and Kid Super and some other artists are getting into that area as well, and they're starting to become toy manufacturers as well with artists, and it's it's extending, it's adding additional revenue streams and things like that, but it's also, you have to learn all these different businesses, and it's tough. I mean, it's tough. I mean, Bob, you've obviously done it, and Mickey, you are in several different areas as well, and they're all different, and they all have risk with it, and you have to be able to stomach that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I've definitely taken up a good amount of your time. I'm not ready to let you go just yet. I was just wondering if you, David, could maybe one more time just talk about the Voltron project that you got going on. When are these pieces going to be available? Where can we see them? Give us a little bit of that info.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know they're going to be available on the Voltron web store, but we're also going to show them at VoltCon, and that is a Voltron fan expo, and that's in Indianapolis, and that is coming up, Bob, in 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, October 14th and 15th. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're going to have 3 of the 5 hopefully ready to go. It's all a process, and we're dealing with printers and things like that, and they'll be available there. And then after that, they'll be on the Voltron store, and then the remaining 2 lines are going to be unveiled after that.
Very, very cool. And Bob, besides David's project here, what's next for Voltron? I mean, a lot of my viewers are comic book readers and collectors. Are we going to see any new comic books soon? You mentioned the movie. What do we have next in store? Anything that you can plug?
Yeah, so we do not have a comic book in development currently. What we have in development is a feature film, and thank God the writer's strike has ended, and our writers are working again, and we're working to get this story right. But that's the biggest thing that's in the works for the franchise is the film, and we're working hard on getting that done. That's the priority, and certainly, in connection with the film, would expect to see some new comic books to come out around that.
All right, very cool. Well, I can tell you for certain that when you come out with news about Voltron, the movie version, the old comics you've been holding up, those Dynamite ones and the ones from the 80s, I promise you are going to be flying off the shelves on eBay. So stay tuned for that. But
get them now, right?
Yeah, gentlemen, exactly. Thank you all so much for hopping on the channel today. Maybe David, I'll start with you. If people want to kind of follow up and take a look at your work or find you on socials, could you give them some info where they can get in touch with you or where they can keep posted on your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is davidruggeri.com, and I'm on Instagram at Dave_Ruggeri. And check me out. Let me know what you think, and have updates of where I'm showing my work and the galleries I'm in and things like that.
And Bob, same from you. Where can the people find you?
Well, you can go to Voltron.com for information about Voltron, and for our company, World Events Productions, we're at wep.com. We have some information about the history of our company, and we actually have some other properties, including Denver the Last Dinosaur, which we're actually developing new content around as well. So we've got some fun things going on.
Very, very cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you all so much for hopping on the channel today, and best of luck with all your projects, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Swagglecast. You too.
Yes, this was fun. See ya.